Lots of other dumb and even evil stuff has been part of the Constitution from time to time, like, for example, the 3/5 Compromise, which declared that representation and taxes should be apportioned among the states by a means of counting that excluded Indians altogether and counted all other persons, by which they meant black people, as 3/5 of a person. Also, there was part of Article 4 of the Constitution that required escaped slaves to be returned to their owners no matter where in the country they had escaped to. The Constitution, admittedly awesome, has some totally not awesome, indefensible stuff in it from time to time. And you can handle that truth in one of two ways. You could acknowledge that the Constitution has had some really crazy stuff in it from time to time, use that as a teaching moment to remember that the Constitution is not the Ten Commandments. The Constitution is a living document that has changed over time in ways both good and bad as the country has gotten older. Or you can be a constitutional fundamentalist, and you can ignore the fact that there has been bad stuff in it over time. And when you stage something that you're calling a reading of the entire Constitution, you just leave out the parts that you find embarrassing to pronounce out loud. It should also be noted that another part of Article 4 was left out of the reading of the Constitution in Congress today. It was Article 4, Section 4. Quote, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence." That section was left out of the reading today as well. Now, I don't think that is because anybody was embarrassed about that section. I don't think it was because that section offended some fundamentalist view of the Constitution as perfect and unchanging. As far as we know, that part of the Constitution was left out of the reading today, at least initially, because, and I quote, "The Constitution was placed in a 3-ring binder and the piece together." So the member of Congress who was reading Article 4 accidentally skipped a bit. See? God's trying to tell us something about human fallibility. Republicans have been in power in the House for roughly 33 hours now, and their initial pledges to the American people have turned out to be kind of a mess. There was today's attempt to read the Constitution in its entirety, which turned into reading whatever pages didn't get stuck together or didn't feel awkward to say out loud. Also, of course, during the campaign, Republicans pledged to cut $100 billion worth of government spending in the first year. That promise has now been cast aside as hypothetical. Republicans have now pledged that they won't even aim higher than $50 billion worth of cuts. Forget that old 100, they didn't mean it. Also in their pledge to America was a Republican promise to allow Democrats to offer amendments to legislation. On their first bill out of the gate, now that they're in charge, Republicans are not going to allow any amendments. After Republicans won control of the House, they made this pledge, apparently from scripted talking points. Watch.
Open rules will make a triumphant return to the House floor.
I think open rules will make a triumphant return to the House floor.
A return to open rules in the House. Not only a return, a triumphant return. Fast forward to today, quote, "None of the bills that will be brought to the floor this week will be brought under open rules." That's not very triumphant. This week, Republicans adopted a new House rule called cut as you go. They ruled that any bill that would add to the deficit has to be matched by spending cuts of the same amount. As you probably know, one of the first bills out of the gate for Republicans is a repeal of health reform, a bill that, according to the nonpartisan CBO, that would add $230 billion to the deficit. Repealing health reform would add $230 billion to the deficit. With this new cut-as-you-go rule, what are the Republicans going to cut to make up for that? Nothing. They issued themselves a loophole, so the very first bill they will introduce to repeal health reform, a loudly proclaimed new rule. Even on the easy stuff, Republicans are having a really difficult time out of the gate. As one of their first pledges of transparency, Republicans promised to make publicly available, quote, "a list of the names of each member in attendance at a committee hearing or meeting." So you get to know who's in attendance at a committee hearing and who is not in attendance. Seems relatively reasonable. But then Tuesday night, behind closed doors, Republicans did away with that provision. They're not going to do that after all. But wait, there's more. In their pledge to America, Republicans also promised to, quote, "require each bill moving through Congress to include a clause citing the specific constitutional authority upon which the bill is justified." If you want to offer a bill, you have to cite where the Constitution allows you to do what's in that bill. As of today, quote, none of the 3 bills that Republicans plan to introduce this week had the constitutional citation.